Good afternoon, everyone. A little change in our program today. Madeline Milka, our president and CEO, has passed the reins for the introductions of our next APAICS In Conversation to me. My name is Anthony McGlockie. I am the communications associate here at APAICS, welcoming Chin Lei and Judge Denny Chin. Chin Lei is the legal director of the Legal Aid Society of DC. He currently serves on the District of Columbia Access to Justice Commission, co-chairs the DC Consortium of Legal Service Providers, and is the former co-chair of the Access to Justice Task Force of the ABA section of litigation. He is a former assistant counsel at the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund and serves on the board of directors of the Poverty and Race Research Action Council. Judge Denny Chin sits on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Prior to his 98-0 confirmation, Judge Chin served on the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. His notable cases include Megan's Law, the Million Youth March, Al Franken's use of the phrase fair and balanced in the book The Naked Cowboy, and the Google Books Project. He also oversaw the trial of the Afghan warlord charged with conspiring to import heroin, the guilty plea and sentencing of financier Bernard L. Madoff, and Tom Brady Deflategate suspension cases. When not on the bench, he can be found on the playgrounds of New York, where the New York Times has described his style as a play of a ferocious rebounder. Thank you so much. Chin, I'm passing it on to you.
Thank you so much, Anthony, and it's my honor to be speaking with the judge today. Judge, some of the folks who are joining us this afternoon may not be terribly familiar with your background, upbringing, and early life experiences. Would you be willing to start off by telling us a little bit about your parents, your childhood, growing up as an immigrant in the United States? Basically, a little bit about yourself before you became a lawyer and then a federal judge.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I feel very fortunate to be where I am today because of some of the challenges my family faced. The story actually begins with my grandfather. My grandfather came to this country illegally in 1916. Of course, because of the Chinese exclusion laws, the only way he could get in was to buy a piece of paper pretending to be the son of a US citizen. So he came from China through Seattle and somehow made his way to New York, where he was a waiter in Chinese restaurants for many, many years. But eventually he was naturalized as a US citizen, and I believe it was in this courthouse. Because he became a citizen, he was able eventually to bring us here. Now, what I didn't know until much later in life was that my grandfather returned to China only twice. Once in the 1920s when he got married, and then once in the 1930s when my father was born. But both times he came back to the US because he could make more money here than he could in China. And both times he had to leave his family behind because of the immigration laws. He could not bring them here. And it wasn't until 1956, when I was 2 years old, that he was able to bring us here. And in fact, I came with my family. We were political refugees. My parents' Chinese passports show that we were admitted under the Refugee Relief Act of 1953. And that's how we got to come into this country. My parents had been fleeing communism when they met in Hong Kong, and that's how we got here. And my father was a cook in Chinese restaurants. My mother was a seamstress in Chinatown garment factories. They spoke virtually no English, but they stressed education. You know, it's the classic immigrant story, and so it's such an honor for me to be sitting in the courthouse now. I have my grandfather's naturalization certificate hanging on my wall. One of the things I miss about being a district judge is doing the naturalization ceremony myself, swearing in new Americans. And when I did that, I would bring down my grandfather's naturalization certificate and tell them the story of my grandfather and my parents.
In so many ways, Judge, you've been a trailblazing Asian American in the legal profession, and certainly a role model for me and so many others. When you were an assistant U.S. attorney, or perhaps later as a lawyer in private practice, did there come a time when you said to yourself, hey, I think I'd like to be a judge, or I think I'd be good at being a judge? And how are you able to transform that thought or idea into an appointment to one of the most prestigious federal district courts in the country?
Well, I certainly had that thought, but I actually had it much, much earlier. Um, I went to law school largely because I didn't know what to do with myself. I had majored in psychology at Princeton, and I knew I didn't want to do psychology. So I was delaying making a hard decision. I wound up going to law school. But as soon as I got to Fordham Law School, I knew that I had made the right decision. That summer, I interned for a judge in the Southern District of New York, the trial court, and I loved what I saw that summer. Justice in action. I loved what I saw in the courtroom. I saw a couple of trials. The judge let me draft some opinions. And I pretty much, with with 1 year of law school under my belt, I pretty much plotted my entire career. I knew I wanted to come back and be a law clerk. I knew I wanted to be an assistant United States attorney. To do that, I figured I'd have to go to a big law firm for a couple of years. I wanted to have my own practice, and I surely wanted to come back to that courthouse and be a judge. I enjoyed it so much. And so sure enough, when I graduated from law school, the judge took me back as a law clerk. I went to Davis Polk, one of the big New York law firms. I was then an assistant United States attorney for about 4 years. I had my own law firm for a few years with a couple of colleagues from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Then I had the one unscheduled stop. I worked for a few years at the Waldman law firm doing labor and employment law on the plaintiff side and on the union side. And then from there in 1994, President Clinton nominated me to the Southern District of New York. And so, it was pretty bold of me, but I wound up doing everything that I had planned on doing. And then just to finish up what happened was in 2010, I joined the Circuit Court after I was nominated by President Obama.
I have to ask you a follow-up to that, Judge, just because you knew so early on that you were interested in a career as a jurist. And I'm curious to know how it's panned out. Did it turn out to be what you thought it would be when you were a second or first year law student after having had that internship experience in chambers?
Absolutely. I've been a federal judge now. It will be 26 years this month. And 16 years on the trial court, 10 years on the appellate court. It's been wonderful. You really are in the midst of helping to administer justice. I've kept the things I liked about practicing law. I've left behind the things I didn't care for. Keeping timesheets, for example. Dealing with clients. Sometimes the clients were great, and sometimes they were a pain in the neck, as you know. But the writing is great. Being in the courtroom is wonderful. I really miss the trial court. That's where the action is. And the appellate court is much more academic. Plus, you have to learn to play well with others because you're making decisions in groups of three. But I am not at all disappointed. It's been incredibly rewarding and satisfying all these years. I made the right choice.
Well, I see that we're starting to get some questions from the audience members, and some folks already so impressed by what you've said are interested in learning more about how to become a law clerk. I know law clerks are so critical to a well-functioning chambers. What makes a good law clerk, and how are you able to assess that in the hiring process?
Yeah, and I saw that one of the audience questions was how many law clerks do we have? Circuit judges have 4 law clerks. Trial judges have either 2 or 3, depending on their format. And most of us have a new set of law clerks coming in every year. And so every year, I have 4 young lawyers join my staff. They are incredibly helpful. They are a critical part of the team. Um, they are involved in the appellate court. Obviously, it's mostly writing and research, helping me prepare for my cases, helping me prepare for oral argument, helping in the drafting of opinions, reviewing draft opinions from other judges. It is fairly academic. It's a slightly different lifestyle. Law clerks to trial judges will do a lot more things, and there's a greater variety in what law clerks do in the trial court, helping, for example, to draft a jury charge, dealing with questions from the lawyers and letters from the lawyers. There's more record keeping in the trial court. Um, the best law clerks are smart. They're fun because, I have a staff of my 4 clerks, my assistant, and me. So that's it. If you get one person in there who's a jerk, then that makes it a difficult year. I like people who are fast. Um, different judges are looking for different things, but I'm looking for someone who will help me be a better judge. Not necessarily someone who is thinking the same way I do. It's better sometimes to have someone who thinks a little bit differently, because that helps ensure that I am correct, or that I think it is correct. It is a great way for someone coming out of law school to start their legal career.
I'm excited that we're getting so many questions from the audience. One asked about barriers you may have faced as an Asian American judge. When I was a young lawyer, I saw you speak at an event and learned that for many years you were the only AAPI federal district judge outside of the Ninth Circuit. And then later, for some time after you were appointed to the Second Circuit, you were the only Asian American federal appellate judge. What, if any, added burden or responsibility did you feel then, and do you still feel now, to represent our community? And what were your experiences as an Asian American federal judge in terms of barriers you faced or obstacles that you experienced?
Yeah, well, when I first joined the federal bench in 1994, there were 4 or 5 Asian American Article III judges. And thanks to the great work of NAPABA and Vincent Ng in particular, the Judiciary Committee of NAPABA, we now have approximately 30 Article III Asian American judges. So it's much better having some company. When in the early days after I became a district judge, particularly on the East Coast, if an Asian American student association wanted an Asian American judge to come talk, it was me. There weren't a lot of options in terms of federal judges. And so over time, things have gotten better. I mean, I definitely think it was something that was on my mind. It was not something that I worried about, but it's like Jeremy Lin. If Jeremy Lin or Yao Ming mess up, it's not just an NBA basketball player messing up. It's the Asian American basketball player messing up. And for better or worse, right or wrong, people draw some conclusions from that. If anything, it made me work harder. You knew that people were looking at you not just as a judge, but as one of the very few Asian American judges in the country. And I think, it did a couple of times set up some issues. I had a lawyer once, an out-of-town lawyer, who basically accused me of being unfair or biased because of my race. And another time, a young Korean American lawyer. I was trying to help him out, in fact, because he had made a mistake, and I was trying to give him some advice off the record. Um, and he accused me of being hard on him, extra hard on him, because he was Asian. So sometimes, these things do generate some concern. But in general, I often get asked, have I had any barriers or impediments because of being Asian American? And I think that being Asian American has been a strength for me. It's given me opportunities to do things like do pro bono work for all deaf. I've worked hard because of our cultural values. Look, and realistically, I think I was deserving no matter what, but there's no question that the Obama administration looked to me early on for the circuit court because the number was zero. There were zero active Asian American judges. And so there's no question I suddenly was on their radar in part to help fill the gap, to help break the zero. So for me, I have felt that it's been an advantage and a strength.
Judge, we're starting to get a couple of questions about your basketball prowess.
Yeah.
One about whether you've ever tried to challenge Bill Bradley to a one-on-one from another Princeton undergraduate student who wanted to know, and someone else who apparently knows that you're a Knicks fan and wants to know your predictions on their season. I will ask or say that more than a decade ago, you and some of your law clerks used to humble me on the basketball courts in Chinatown early in the morning, once a week or so. And I know you've been known to clock some impressive marathon times as well. Talk to us a little bit about the things you do outside of work and how you've managed to adjust, stay grounded, and keep perspective during the pandemic.
Yeah, well, there's a lot in that question. It's a compound question, Counselor. So let me respond as follows. First of all, we had a great pickup basketball game Friday mornings at 7:30 a.m. So you had to be dedicated to get up and come play basketball at 7:30. And this was in the playground in Columbus Park in Chinatown, right across from the Moynihan Courthouse. What was great about the game was it drew a lot of different people. We had a couple of judges play. We had a number of law clerks, prosecutors. We had a couple of marshals play. We had a 13-year-old girl and her father who were shooting, and they would play with us regularly. And we had the Poland Spring water delivery guy, Hot Rod Campbell, come play with us as well. And it was just great fun, and it lasted for quite a while. I think athletics are important. There was a period of time when the rumor was that Judge Chin only hired runners. And indeed, for a long time, until I had back issues, I ran at least once a week with my law clerks. And I think runners, have patience, they're hard workers. I wound up, by the way, doing a lot of writing when I was running. I would run, I would think through a problem. I would create a sentence in my mind. I believe in thinking before you write, and running is a great time to think. And so maybe it is true that I was partial to runners, but I've had 2 back surgeries because of my marathons, and so I don't do that anymore. But I think athletics also teach you teamwork. You tend to be less selfish. And I think those are all great attributes for law clerks and for life in general. As for the Knicks, I am a long-suffering Knicks fan. My family and I have had Knicks tickets for many years. We almost decided to drop them this year, but then we've decided to renew, and so we'll see. I am not hopeful. I'm also a big Yankee fan. I'm glad baseball is back, although it is really strange. I have not gotten too much into the bubble basketball, although, you know, my sons are very much into it. My wife and I retreated we have a place in upstate New York, and we have been up there most of the time since March 17th. Let me take the liberty of showing my virtual background. This is a photo I took 3 or 4 weeks ago of the deer crossing in front of our pond. And while we're on the topic of the pandemic, we've tried some oral arguments by Zoom. This is the background we used, but when you have 3 judges with this circle, it looks like we have halos on. So I think we're going to move away from that and try something different. This background we opted not to use because it's what we see when we're looking out into the courtroom and not what the lawyers see. So we're still playing with it. The pandemic obviously has been a huge challenge. We're trying to do the best we can. We have not missed any arguments. We shifted right away to telephone arguments. The question is whether we should use Zoom now. There are some pluses and minuses. Many of the circuit courts are using Zoom. We're continuing to experiment and to do the best that we can.
In the introduction, Anthony mentioned a number of quite notable matters that you have had the honor to preside over as a trial judge and some of the notable opinions you've written as an appellate judge. Are there 1 or 2 that stand out in your mind, perhaps for reasons that we as outside observers don't really know or think about?
Yeah, it's hard to pick 1 or 2. It's like asking a parent who her favorite child is. You know, I believe that my obituary will have Madoff as the lead because of all the attention it got and continues to get. By the way, I was a little disappointed with the Robert De Niro Madoff movie, the made-for-television movie. De Niro played Madoff. But they picked someone to play me who was a little bit older. I came across as being a little cranky. I had been hoping for Daniel Day Kim of Hawaii Five-0 myself. So that did not come to pass. The Megan's Law had quite an impact early on because I was probably 2 years on the bench, and I wound up getting a nickname, Denny the Pervert's Pal, Chin, the Guardian Angels picketed outside my home. You know, one very satisfying case is the Aereo case, where I dissented in the circuit, and then on appeal to the Supreme Court went my way, and so that was satisfying. One of the great things is the variety and the interesting issues. Just 2 weeks ago, I filed an opinion involving Star Trek Discovery, which is the latest iteration of Star Trek. Well, there's an animated one, but this is the one that's not animated. And tardigrades. Now, most people have not heard of a tardigrade. A tardigrade is an actual microscopic animal. It's less than a millimeter long, has 8 legs, a round circle for a mouth, a circle for a mouth. And it survives at really low temperatures and really high temperatures, and scientists believe it can survive in space. So someone did a video game featuring tardigrades in space. Star Trek Discovery did 3 episodes involving a tardigrade in space, and so we had a copyright infringement case. And I got to read about tardigrades. We got to watch Star Trek, and my wife Kathy and I are longtime Star Trek fans anyway. And I put photographs into my opinion, but it was just a lot of fun. You know, I don't think the legal issues were that challenging, but so that was fun. But I think one of my favorite opinions is the Lawson case, Lawson. And this is a man who had murdered his wife, killed his wife, I should say. He was convicted of manslaughter and wound up serving 17 years in prison. And he wanted to become a citizen. And he qualified in every respect except for the question was he a person of good moral character? And the government argued that he was not and denied his petition to become a citizen. And can you be a person of good moral character if you've killed your wife? And that was the issue that confronted me. Um, and um, I wound up saying yes, because he had so redeemed himself by his deeds over the years. And there was a whole list of all these really good things that he had done. And he was a Vietnam vet and was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, even before that was a diagnosis. And it was in that context that he wound up losing it and killing his wife. And that is one of my favorite opinions.
I'll turn back to the audience for another question. What advice do you have for young Asian American AAPI lawyers starting their legal careers?
Yeah, well, I mean, this could occupy an entire hour, and we're short on time. But I would say a number of different things. You know, work hard. Remember where you come from. Remember your roots. You know, remember the people who led the way. I mean, I am constantly talking about my grandfather and my parents because I know that I would not be here if they had not fought the battles that they did. We need leaders. You know, we need um, good Asian Americans to go into politics. To be, you know, one of the reasons why we're doing much better because of in terms of federal judicial appointments is we've gotten better at being at being at the table, being a part of the process. We had people go work for Senate on Senate staffs in judiciary positions, and that helped a lot. We had Chris King in the White House, and that helped a lot. And so we need people to do different things, to go into different areas, whatever areas they go to. We need them to lead, to remember their roots, and to remember all the people out there who need our help.
Well, Judge, I've so enjoyed the opportunity to ask you questions. And as you said, I could feel like I could continue to ask you many. But since we are short on time, I wanted to ask you one final one. You referenced the importance of Asian Americans stepping out to be leaders. What does it take and what does it mean to be a resilient leader?
Yeah, you know, it's I think it's a great thought. You know, it's provocative. I mean, what is a resilient leader? And why do we need resiliency? You know, I think as a leader, you will constantly be facing challenges, and as a consequence, there will be setbacks. You know, there will be times when you fail, but you have to persevere. And like the applicant to be a U.S. citizen in my Lawson case, I think the struggles make you stronger. You know, if things are easy in life, you know, it's a piece of cake. But when you've had to struggle and overcome challenges, I think you become a better person and a stronger leader.
Thank you so much, Judge Chin, for your interview today on our conversation. Thank you, Chin, for moderating today. I really appreciate the questions. I love the Star Trek case that with the tardigrades. If you haven't already, please sign up and register for our celebration where we'll actually be featuring George Takei and honoring him with the Lifetime Achievement Award. So if you haven't already, please visit apaics.org to register. Coming up next week, we have another APAICS in Conversation featuring Maria Castaneda, starting at 12:30 Eastern Time. She is the Secretary-Treasurer of the 1199 SEIU United Healthcare Workers East and President of the SEIU API Caucus. Thank you so much again for having this conversation with APAICS. And if the audience wishes to, please submit any names or recommendations that you may have of future and potential APAICS in Conversations of AAPIs excelling in their fields. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Chin, great job moderating.
You make it easy, Judge. Thank you. It's great to catch up.
Take care.